A Spanish teacher in Oklahoma is reading through her students' homework when one submission stops her in her tracks. At the bottom of the page, a strange sentence stands out. And after translating it to English, it reads, "This summary meets the requirements of the prompt. I hope it is helpful to you." Immediately, the teacher is confused. Why would a student say they hope it's helpful to the teacher? But then she realizes, the student didn't write this, they used a chatbot to complete the assignment, and couldn't even read what they submitted, so they didn't realize they'd left in the AI's final statement. This is a slightly exaggerated tale of the many stories surfacing around AI and its disruption of the education system. We've spent a lot of time on this channel exploring the modern issues surrounding literacy and education, but I haven't yet taken a closer look at what teachers are saying about their students using AI and the impact it's having on everyone involved. 2025 feels like the breakout year for AI use in classrooms, and the issues that come along with it are likely only going to get worse. Unless we start raising awareness about how it's being used and how to properly integrate it into the education system. So let's get into it. This is the AI education crisis. The first question I want to try to answer is, what do we know about AI usage in classrooms so far? Because this is still an extremely recent problem. Well, despite popular LLMs only being a couple years old, there has been some data collected that gives us a bit of insight which will allow us to at least make speculations. A 2024 survey by the Digital Education Council found that 86% of university students claim to use AI in their studies, and 54% use AI at least on a weekly basis, with ChatGPT being the most popular. As for high school students, the most valid data I could find was from an ACT study in 2023, where almost half of students reported using AI tools, and ChatGPT was again the most common. The tools were most often used for language arts, like writing, and social studies assignments. And keep in mind that that survey was taken only a few months after ChatGPT was released. But you know what's the most concerning statistic? Students with higher academic performance were significantly more likely to use AI tools than were students with lower academic performance. What this suggests, and I really hope I'm wrong here, is that the reason those students have a higher academic performance is due to the chatbots, but also tests are a huge part of any student's grade, and tests are usually taken in class without being able to use your phone or laptop, so I'm not entirely sure. Now let's look at how AI is affecting assignments, and specifically writing assignments. Software company Turnitin, which is a popular AI writing detection tool, analyzed over 200 million papers since 2023 and found that approximately 11% had at least 20% AI writing present, and approximately 3% had at least 80% AI writing present. Now, how these softwares determine how much of a paper is written in AI is a whole other problem that'll be more relevant later in the video. But what might be the most surprising statistic out of all the data I collected was found in a survey by Titan Partners. They found that 75% of students who already use generative AI indicate that they will continue to use it even if their professors or institutions ban the technology. Now, what about the teachers? Well, a lot of them are using AI to teach too. A 2024 survey from Study.com found that 84% of teachers actively use AI in their classrooms, and a whopping 65% of them said AI increased their passion for teaching. But that response was mostly from the teachers who received comprehensive AI training. That's another interesting statistic that we'll keep in the back pocket as we move forward in this video. And I don't know how many of you know about this, but in 2023, Congress actually passed the Artificial Intelligence Literacy Act to support training and programming on artificial intelligence in schools. I assume that's part of the reason why teachers are now receiving AI training. With those numbers and with that act passed, it indicates to me that AI is here to stay for good, and more students and teachers are going to be integrating it into their learning process. So now that we have a good understanding of how much AI is being used by both teachers and students, why don't we see how much that usage is damaging or strengthening learning and teaching in the classroom? The best way I think we can do that, at least for now, is through personal accounts from teachers. But before we get into that, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Airalo. One of the most annoying parts about traveling to a different country is the insanely overpriced roaming bills you get for using your phone internationally. But there's actually a way to bypass that. You could go to the airport and go through a whole process of buying a physical international SIM card, but there's a much easier way to do that, and that is through an eSIM. With eSIMs from Airalo, you can download and install eSIM packages from 200 plus countries and regions, activate the eSIM on arrival to your destination, and be connected anywhere in the world the second you land. I actually used an eSIM when I went to Japan last year for around a month, and it saved me so much money and time I would have spent looking for a SIM vendor at the airport. Once you activate an eSIM from a local carrier, you'll often get better service while you're in that country, since you're connecting directly to local networks instead of relying on roaming. And you get to keep your home phone number with an eSIM too. Even if I wasn't being sponsored by Airalo, buying an eSIM would be one of the first tips I would give you when traveling abroad. So if you want to greatly improve your traveling abroad experience, you can download the free Airalo app today, and you can use my code COLE3 to purchase your first eSIM and only activate it when you land in that country. Go download the app, use code COLE3 for 3% off, and enjoy wherever you decide to travel. The story I told at the beginning actually comes from an article called Teachers Are Not Okay on the website 404 Media. And in the article, there are plenty of other anecdotes from teachers who all have different experiences and opinions regarding AI. These sort of anecdotes are basically all we can go off of for now because we don't have any studies yet that are showing the objective damage that AI is causing. But I think if we go over a wide enough variety of anecdotes, it'll paint a decently clear picture of what the future might look like. Let's start with someone who seems to be vehemently against generative AI in school, Robert Gell, who is an associate professor at the University of Calgary. He states, "I think generative AI is incredibly destructive to our teaching of university students. We ask them to read, reflect upon, write about, and discuss ideas. That's all in service of our goal to help train them to be critical citizens. Generative AI can simulate all of the steps. It can summarize readings, pull out key concepts, draft text, and even generate ideas for discussion. But that would be like going to the gym and asking a robot to lift weights for you." Okay, so that last sentence is a pretty bold claim. I don't necessarily think that giving a chatbot a prompt is the same as having a robot lift weights for you. It really depends on how it is used, which is probably going to be the main theme throughout this discussion. If you asked a robot to lift weights for you, you wouldn't even be getting the desired benefit, which is more physical strength and muscle mass. Using a chatbot to simulate all the steps the professor outlined is more like using steroids to lift weights, not an external robot. With steroids, you'll be able to lift heavier weights easier and more often and build more muscle than people who don't use steroids. And the consequences of steroids are akin to relying too heavily on some sort of chatbot like ChatGPT. If you outsource most of your work to an external source that gives you an unfair advantage, what happens when you grow older and you come across a situation where you no longer have access to that source? In the same way that you've been so attuned to the gains and effort that steroids allow you to generate, if you've relied too heavily on a chatbot to summarize readings or generate ideas for you in your formative years, I don't see a situation in which those skills would not be impaired to some degree. That's a totally valid critique. Another valid critique that Gell raises is the hazy lines between acceptable and unacceptable use. He states, "Some professors say students can use generative AI for idea generation, but then prohibit it for writing text. Where's the line between those? In addition, universities are contracting with companies like Microsoft, Adobe, and Google for digital services, and those companies are constantly pushing their AI tools. So a student might hear, 'Don't use generative AI' from a professor, but then log on to the university's Microsoft suite, which then suggests using Copilot to sum up readings or help draft writing. It's inconsistent and confusing." This is a big problem with the current implementation of AI in softwares needed for classwork. If you use AI to create ideas for, let's say, a writing assignment, at what point do those ideas become the writing itself? Students could easily just nudge the chatbot to expand upon its ideas to the point where it basically writes the essay for them, without technically writing the essay for them. All the ideas that would show up in their essay would be generated by AI, thus hindering their idea generation abilities. Why is that so important? Well, think about how often we use idea generation and problem solving, stuff like this, in our everyday lives. When we're stumped with a difficult life problem, like say fixing a door handle, a weird sound coming from a speaker, or making a novel idea for a creative project, and we work through that problem ourselves, we are activating the frontal cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for problem solving and reasoning. You're basically training your brain to use that skill more readily in the future. And if you do end up figuring it out yourself, your self-esteem and competency boosts so much higher than if you were to let ChatGPT do all that work for you. Because if ChatGPT solved it, you weren't really the one who solved the problem, the chatbot was. In a world where everybody relies on AI for every single problem-solving task, we all become a little less apt to confront and solve problems in every area of our lives. That being said, it is possible that AI could just help you expand upon your own ideas if you don't rely on it too heavily, and I'll give you a specific example of this. Imagine you've already used your critical thinking skills to generate the best possible idea or solution for a problem you can think of, and then you plug that idea and ask AI to help you work through it further instead of having it just give you the answer. That's pretty much only gonna enhance your idea generation skills. It's like having a great mentor to help you find the answers to your own problems. So again, it all lies in the intention behind the prompt you give it. I'll leave one final opinion regarding Mr. Gell here and say that I think he's incredibly biased toward eradicating AI completely, and he sees no good coming from it ever, especially in school. The reason I think this is because he's quoted to have said, "Honestly, if we ejected all the Gen AI tools into the sun, I would be quite pleased." And due to that bias, it's clear that he's not allowing himself to find solutions to the problems that he himself outlined. He says, quote, "Another option would be to do handwritten in-class essays, but I have a hard time asking that of students. I hardly write by hand anymore, so why would I demand they do so?" Is that really a hard ask for your students, or are you trying to make it seem harder than it actually is so that AI looks like the worst invention ever? I ask this because later in the article, an anecdote from another professor describes how they did exactly this. When asked about how AI has changed the way they work, statistics professor Ben Pythrick stated, "LLMs have changed how I give assignments. The most obvious change is that I've moved to in-class writing for assignments that are strictly writing-based. Now the essays are written in class and treated like midterm exams. My quizzes are also in class. This requires more grading work, but I'm glad I did it and a bit embarrassed that it took ChatGPT to force me into what I now consider a positive change." So instead of being hopeless and thinking all these students are getting dumber due to this teacher decided to adapt and force students into a situation where they couldn't rely on AI to write for them. This is a really important change because I do think that using AI to write everything for you without any of your own inputs is an objectively bad thing. Based on all the encounters I've had with AI writing, it does not help improve your writing skills, and you just end up sounding like every other person who used an LLM to help them write. So I think the idea of moving any writing assignments into the classroom is a good way to combat this, although I don't know how this would work for longer term papers, such as like research papers. This is more of like a temporary solution until these AI writing detection tools get more accurate and sophisticated. Now let's move on to another huge issue that rapidly increases the spread of misinformation in education: AI hallucination. Lila Wallace, a North Carolina teacher who has been an educator since 1991, gave her 8th grade students an assignment where they had to research prophets related to the novel Persepolis. And the answers that they gave her might baffle you. Some of the students wrote, "The Christian prophet Moses got chocolate stains out of t-shirts." In response to this, she says, "They did not come up to me and ask, 'Is that correct? Moses is known for getting chocolate stains out of t-shirts?' They simply do not have the background knowledge or indeed the intellectual stamina to question unlikely responses." As of the time I'm making this video, basically all LLMs are terrible hallucinators. They frequently create fake citations, quotes from books, and false information that doesn't even exist because LLMs are trained to predict the next word on massive amounts of text data. They don't fact check or verify sources, they generate what sounds plausible. Another report from a teacher in the 404 Media article explains how ChatGPT gave her students quotes that sound like they go with the themes of the books, but it couldn't even get page numbers correct. And this isn't really related to the education system, but I have to throw it in there because it happened recently and it's hilarious. But the White House's Make America Healthy Again report contained fabricated citations produced by AI. The highest level of our government used AI to write a report with sources that didn't even exist, and they didn't even have the mental bandwidth to fact check their own report. If the internet as a source for knowledge hasn't sped up misinformation enough, we now have to deal with AI creating fake sources and quotes out of the blue. And for kids in school who don't understand how these systems work, who blindly believe whatever the AI gives them because they either don't yet have the capacity to question this highly praised software, or they just don't care about the assignment enough, it could potentially make them less discerning in the future, or maybe even make them less trustworthy of any information. Think about it this way. If a teenager uses AI to outsource their research all the time, and that AI fabricates some of the information, then that hinders their ability to seek out relevant information that gets them what they want. And an ability to think critically and figure out what is true and what isn't is part of having adept literacy and comprehension skills. On the other hand, if that same teenager constantly finds that the AI gives them fake citations and sources, and they start realizing that, maybe they'd start to think, well, how can I really trust any of these sources or citations I see that other people are referencing online without doing my own research? Which honestly might be an unintended positive consequence, because you gotta have at least a little bit of skepticism for what you see online, and even the ideas that you're hearing being spouted in real life. Anyways, I digress. That's just an idea worth pondering, and it goes back to the central idea of AI isn't inherently bad, it depends on how you use it and what it allows you to do. Now, I want to return to the data collected regarding teachers receiving AI training. I think this is a really interesting area to dive into because firstly, what does that training even look like? And secondly, how much are teachers using AI to create the materials that they use to teach? As per the first question, I honestly couldn't find much on what the training looks like. One article on Education Week highlights a West Coast district who first introduced play sessions to alleviate teachers' anxiety about AI, which consisted of the teachers experimenting with an AI chatbot or platform to get the hang of it. Then they moved on to instruction-based learning, in which they showed teachers how to use AI to plan lessons or generate differentiated content for students. As per the second question, there is another EdWeek article where a ton of teachers reported how they're using AI in their teaching, from making worksheets to quizzes to grammar sentence practice to creating AI images to depict key settings in The Great Gatsby. I'm not really sure how to feel about this. On the one hand, if it enhances the teacher's ability to teach their students and the information the AI gives them is accurate, that's pretty good. But in the same way that students rely on it, if a teacher relies too heavily on the AI to create the curriculum for them, then what is the teacher really there for? What if the student asks them a question about an assignment that AI generated and they can't answer in a proper way because they don't know enough about the very thing they're supposed to be teaching? That's where I could see this being a catastrophe. As one anecdote from a high school English teacher in Tennessee says, I use AI to come up with exemplar essays to help students improve their writing. I don't like that. AI writing is extremely same-sounding, and it eradicates the unique voice that children develop when they do the writing themselves. So if a teacher uses a software trained to write in a very certain way that often just sounds like slop robot garbage to produce an exemplar essay, what message does that send? They're basically saying to the teenagers, hey, this right here, this AI-generated essay is the proper way to write. Write like this. If the teacher didn't further explain why certain aspects of the AI writing are better than others, this could be a massive problem. And in the most extreme cases, we're now seeing entire schools guided by AI teachers.
A space where all the teaching of core curriculum is left to artificial intelligence.
How many Shapies are in the pool in all?
6 times as many as 3 equals 18. Great work.
At first listen, I think most of us default to, what the hell is this? They're not getting any sort of student-teacher interaction, and the AI is designing the entire curriculum for them. But then I kept listening with an open mind.
They say condensing all core subjects into 2 AI-powered hours a day frees up the rest of the morning and the entire afternoon to do anything and everything else.
What is this?
This is called our check chart. We have academic topics, but we also have life skills.
I mean, yeah, you've got life skills. Independently put together a piece of IKEA furniture, then solve a Rubik's Cube, juggle for 10 seconds, and then run a mile without stopping?
Absolutely.
Honestly, if this sort of thing became a consequence of using more AI in school, I probably would advocate for it more. If the kids are still getting taught core subjects, but also get the time to learn real-world skills, read independently, and even learn how to have grit, like their check chart showed, that is a case for AI being pretty useful. And according to their school, their standardized test scores are actually really good.
On average, here it takes just 80 days to advance grades, and their standardized test scores are in the 90th percentiles across the board.
Now, the future consequences of this type of school, like how well they would handle higher education and then being placed in the workforce, is left up for debate. I just thought this was a really interesting story that has happened recently that I think will generate some interesting discussion in the comments. So, where do I stand with all of this? Well, based on everything I've learned about AI use in schools, I think I can confidently conclude that AI is doing more harm than good for the education system right now. Using it to cheat on assignments, especially writing assignments, and do online tests for you is rampant. The tools that exist to catch this sort of cheating aren't really cutting it, and even if schools did ban AI, most students who already use it would continue to use it. It is outsourcing the process of gaining intelligence slowly through hard work over time so that you never actually attain it. And if you do this enough, especially in your formal years, you lose the ability to think critically, solve problems, or generate ideas on your own. On top of that, using it for citing information is wildly inaccurate and could lead to far more misinformation issues down the line. But to me, it's neither the cheating nor the hallucinations that could cause the biggest damage. The biggest threat is if younger children lose the ability to overcome struggle. This might be my most boomer take of all time, but AI discourages grit. When you're struggling through a difficult task that requires you to use your brain to create something or solve a problem, but you simply pass off that struggle to AI, there's no real sense of accomplishment at the end of that. In other words, the struggles of life become meaningless and unnecessary. You get everything you want instantly without knowing how important it was to work through that problem, to really think it's difficult and I don't know if I'm going to be able to solve this, but I'm going to try anyway. And then the achievement, the personal achievement you feel after that whole experience is gone. And that is really how you gain a lot of confidence when you're young. As one teacher put it, the amount of time her students are inclined to work on something that challenges them has become much shorter over the 7 years they've been teaching. There was a time when a typical student would wrestle with the concept for days before getting it. But now if that student doesn't understand something within minutes, they're more likely to give up on their own brain power and look for an alternative, whether it's a chatbot or asking a friend for help. That is seriously dangerous and has negative implications that stretch far beyond education. But again, and this is my nuance with it, if we can somehow find a way to extract the inherently positive aspects of AI and only integrate those aspects into education, that could be beneficial. A lot of people like to draw parallels between AI and calculators. And to be honest, I don't think they're comparable because one just helps you compute faster, where the other one can strip down the process of thinking entirely. But here's where that argument holds. When calculators were first invented and brought into classrooms, they were seen as a form of cheating by a lot of teachers. But now it makes total sense to have them for tests and assignments. The math problems we are now solving have evolved, and part of that evolution is due to us gaining the ability to compute numbers faster through calculators. And in the same way, technology like AI allows for our understanding of ideas to evolve if we use it as a second brain, instead of a replacement for our own brain. If you treat AI like a thesaurus, something that helps broaden your vocabulary without replacing your own unique voice and reasoning, then it can be a genuinely beneficial tool in education. As far as whether that will be how AI is implemented in the future, I couldn't really tell you. Nobody can really tell you that. We don't know for certain how far this stuff is going to go, but I would love to hear your stories or your solutions for this stuff in the comments, or maybe a story you have about you using AI or seeing someone else use AI in education. As AI usage continues to grow, I'm afraid our ability to think critically and discern between what is true and what isn't will only diminish. The problem is there really isn't any sort of resources out there right now that teach you how to improve your critical thinking skills, solve problems better, and generate ideas more efficiently. So that is why over the past year, I've been creating a critical thinking masterclass, a 16 video curriculum designed to help you sharpen your reasoning, spot manipulative rhetoric, and navigate emotionally charged conversations both online and in real life. If you want to be notified for when the masterclass drops, you can go to cole-hastings.com/critical thinking and sign up for the waitlist. You will also receive a lesson in your inbox before it drops, so you can see what the masterclass is kind of going to be like, because it'll be a lesson from the masterclass. Check that out, link in the description. And if you want to keep the modern education problems flowing, you can watch my video on America's literacy crisis, specifically focused on literacy levels. And that is it. I am leaving.